very happy to have Franck, our Moenner, who is conservation, recently moved back to conservation after a number of years working in the food industries, moved back to conservation and took up a post for the Loud Nature Trust on Baltray Beach, which is literally just the other side of Mornington Beach, doing conservation work to protect a colony of Little Terns. Frank, you can correct me on any of this. This is what
No, that's good. You're doing great.
So yeah, really, from our perspective, we're just really excited to hear what he's been doing in those last few months, because we have been getting, we have a WhatsApp group that sort of we share these photographs. He's been sharing some incredible footage and photographs that he's taken on that beach. I'll try my best to get as much of it up online as possible. But I thought maybe that the talk would be the best way to look at some of these images and stories that he's had while he's been working there. So Frank, take it away. And if anyone has any questions, you know, this is more of a conversational piece.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want it to be too formalized. And yeah, you can even put your questions in the chat if you don't want to speak, and if you do, just maybe raise your hand, turn on your video screen, raise your hand, or I think there's an option there with the reactions where you can actually raise your hand and I can maybe get Frank to answer any questions. Okay, Frank, go ahead if you want to just share your screen first.
Yeah, so like Paul said, you know, I went back into conservation after it was kind of a calling. After many years in the food industry, like some of you may not know, I trained as an ornithologist and a wildlife guide in my young years in Brittany, in various kind of places, mostly in the old salt marshes of South Brittany to the cliffy coast of the west of Brittany near Douarnenez. So mostly on waders, seabirds, kittiwakes, and so forth. So anyway, I went back and I just had that calling to go back, and the job was advertised with Louth Nature Trust. So it's an independent trust, but we kind of, like all those little organizations, you know, are working together in terms of sharing, you know, their data, what they're doing, and so forth. So I thought this could be a lovely way to go back into it. So I emailed actually because similar jobs are advertised with Birdwatch Ireland at that time of year between Rockabill Lighthouse, Kilcool. There is also colony in Portrane in County Dublin, if I'm not mistaken, and of course Baltray. But you know, we all communicate together. So I got the gig for Baltray in County Louth, which is literally the other side of the mouth of the Boyne, if you want. And what makes this area very, very favorable for the terns is that it has those kind of pebble dunes, pebble beaches that the little tern really favor. I don't know if you can see on the screen here, if it's popping up.
Yeah, it's fine, yeah.
Great. So you see that kind of environment, that's what they're looking for. And what you need is also a good supply of food. What's good in that picture is that you can see one of their favorite food is sand eels. And they also would go after, you know, sprats, little fish. And the fact that the Boyne River, obviously, there is fresh water right there, literally behind the dune. It's kind of an unusual place, if you wish, because you can see the bulk boats, cargoes, you know, arriving inside the Boyne River. And if you're not aware, if you're on the dune, then you can see them boats literally floating, you know, behind the dune. So it's an unusual environment. So yeah, so we started, and I started mid-May, and I don't know if you can recall, but the weather was pretty cold. We had it was more of a nocturnal weather for a long time, even in June. So the terns were there. You know, they were, how do you say, they were already inspecting the site, looking for their partners. The little terns, the thing that's interesting with them is that they keep the same partners for life unless something happens. And so there was a lot of porriding, messing around for the first couple of weeks, and that means, you know, flying together, and like you can see on that image is the presentation of a fish as well. So saying, look, you know, I am able to provide, and that is just basically the courtship, you know, what's going on, just establishing themselves, you know, ready to go for nidifications. Now, just to give you an idea, like the little tern is nearly half the size of a common tern, and a common tern is not very, very big, and it weighs just under the weight of a tennis ball. So just to give you an idea of the size of the bird. And so once the bird then established themselves on the colony on the pebbles, now the idea behind the pebble is that eggs would literally be camouflaged, you know, into the whole thing, and give them an extra chance against predators and so forth. So we had the first eggs by the end of May, beginning of June. So on average, a little tern would lay about 2 eggs. So I don't know if I have some here I could show you. It would be ideal. So you can see that's an egg there behind. Yeah, so that's a tern egg. Okay. Can you see them here?
Yeah.
Cool. So on average, they would lay about two eggs. I would have sometimes 3 eggs. I had actually 3 very successful hatchlings and fledglings of 3 eggs, which was quite a moment. But so that is the size of the egg. So lost in a carpet of little stones and pebbles with sand, it's very, very difficult to actually spot. So the site in Baltray would be about 900 meters long, and let's say 20-30 meters wide. So it's quite a big surface, and everything is fenced. All the volunteers, the members have fenced it off. Now you need to be careful to not to fence the area too early, because you want to make sure where the terns are going to stay. They might favor an area more than another, and that may not be the same one year to another. And basically, when you spot the birds sitting, that means, you know, they're more than likely to be on a nest. And the nest is very simple. It's just a little depression in the sand. And what I was doing is every week, because I'm very aware the way I was not raised, but educated, if you want, trained back home, was always to minimize disturbances. To, you know, that's important. And tern can be very taciturn, if you forgive the pun. And like I've seen some colonies of common terns literally giving up everything because of too much disturbance. I mean, eggs, chicks, just going, you know. So I was aware of that, you know. I wasn't very familiar with little terns. There is a colony back home in literally across from my grandparents' place. It's about a 30-40 minutes boat ride on the Glennon Island, and there is also a project there. And I'm actually hoping this week to get in touch with the warden, with the person that was looking after that project, just to exchange a few notes and a chat, make it a bit of fun. And so yeah, so the nest is literally a little depression in the sand, and they lay about 2 eggs, and it takes about 21 days, 18 to 21 days for the chick to hatch. And so it's an incredible process, a very, very quick process, because then from the chick to become an adult, you're talking about another 18 to 21 days. So basically, I used to go inside those areas once a week and cover them literally foot by foot. And I used like one of those rather cuttlefish, what do you call them? Rather shell to just scan in front of me, and it's one step after another. Then once I arrive at the end of the width of the pen, I would do 2 or 3 steps and then back again. So to cover the whole area.
Sorry, so Frank, you're walking with a particular stick to ensure that you don't walk in these...
literally to scan, like to scan in front of me like this.
Oh, right, okay.
Just in front of your step, so it's a little technique I thought was working for me, because that means it gives you an extra kind of visual support,
of course, yeah.
of the area you're doing. And it took me about 6 hours to cover the whole site. I mean, more or less, but at the beginning, you want to make sure you're not missing any birds. And every single nest, I put a little marker. It could be one of those shell. You don't want to make it too obvious, because we have 2 other species of birds that are very interested in what you're doing, is the rooks and the gray crows. And believe me, they literally scrutinize what you're doing, what you're putting in the ground. So you have to be aware of them as well, not to make it too obvious. So we had to keep an eye on the rooks and the hooded crows as well, because who doesn't like a good egg, to change your diet. But it was very successful. And once the colony is established, especially once the chicks are born, then they are little fighters. I mean, they go for it. They go after peregrine, they go after rooks. I mean, birds that are 4 times their size. But the whole colony seems to be acting as one to defend each other. And even the plovers would share, the little plovers would share that area, and they've done very well. Let me see if I can find a picture of plovers. See, that's a plover's nest, okay? Can you see on screen? So literally very similar. So tern, plover, very, very similar, maybe a slight tint greener. And the top of the egg is slightly pointer. And unlike the little tern, the plovers likes to have a bit of cover. It likes to have a bit of green around, as the terns would rather have an open space. That's obviously for predators. So they all have their techniques. And once the chick comes out of the egg, the plover is what is called nidifugus. So you have nidifugus and nidicolus. So nidifugus means they're literally pretty much independent. They can run around, as the little terns are semi-nidifugus, if you want. They're able to walk around after a couple of days, no problem. But they are very dependent of the adult to feed them. But they share the same space. So we have to be very, very careful when you're entering those areas, not to step on one. So to do it, take your time, and to do it, to record and to map that area. The plovers chicks come out a bit later. It can be up to 30 days for them to come out. But we were keeping an eye on them as well, so that was a very interesting moment. So, and that's it. That's when it happened. Actually witnessed this fella coming out literally very young when it came out, very fresh, and you can see the sibling coming out now of its own nest. And just to share a few pictures, that's a tern's nest, I think. More tern eggs. That's the nest, you know, a little depression in the sand. And let's see if we have anything that way. Yeah, there you go. That's just a few hours old, so you have an idea, basically. So it would take them about another 21 days to be from that stage, which is on that picture. Basically, it's the size of nearly half of my thumb. You know, it's really tiny. It's very small. So you keep an eye on them, and even though you have the nest marked with a little marker, after 2 days you can forget about it. You know, they're gone on a walkabout. They could be hiding and feeding in the marram grass behind. So it's very difficult to keep an eye on them all at the same time. But you know, with the activities of the adults, and you know, I would keep an eye as well inside the protected area once a week, just to check for, you know, if there was a sick bird or, you know, a dead chick. But we've only had a couple. You know, it's been very good, and predation has been you know, kept at bay. So we haven't witnessed anything, you know, or traces of any predations. So the foxes as well are around. We had the previous years sparrowhawks that were quite fond of grabbing chicks. This year we literally had a young peregrine coming literally every day, but I think it was more after the, you know, the dunlin and the sanderlings waders that are feeding on the shoreline. So there you go. So from that little guy there, 21 days later, they are nearly fully grown terns, and they can, you know, they can fly into that stage. That's about 18 to 21 days old, and they can already fly, which is quite it's quite incredible. And that's 3 of them I had to find. Oops, sorry. That's, so you can see the black is getting starts to appear on the cap, and that is after about 21 days. So all in all, you need a good you know, a good 2 months, a solid 2 months, you know, just to see everyone basically ready to fly. Once the birds are at that stage, they will go into they could still be inside the protected area, but in fact they can fly, and they get fed in the morning, and in the afternoon, after the snooze, you can see them going literally on a training course with the adults. And I actually have seen the 3 that were born going into training with one of the parent, and the training consists in a parent carrying one of the fish and just flying in front of them, flying and landing, so they can you know, they can train on their just on their flying techniques. And then when you see the fledglings having a bit more confidence, you can see when the tide is retreating and it's leaving ponds, you know, different ponds around, the fledgling would go and dive in those ponds and grab some seaweed, some algae. So you can see they're actually training, you know, themselves for feeding. So all of this happened very quickly. And like Dominic Artigan was saying, it takes they get to the adult age 365 times faster than we do, as in 21 days, 21 years. Anyway, it's all quite fascinating. So this is it, in a nutshell. And then as we speak, they are gathering around different area, or they gather each other. You can see them around that time of year, probably around Sandy Mount. They will gather around that area of all the colonies, and then they'll take off to spend the winter in Portugal, Western Portugal, obviously, and Western Africa, Morocco, Mauritania, and as far as Ghana. So quite a journey for the rarest nesting seabird in Ireland. And there you go. If you have any question, fire up. I'm just going to have a sip.
Frank, I have lots of questions. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Okay, well, Terry, you can go after me. I just need to ask one thing. First of all, and it sort of fits into the question that I had about like they're migrating back to those parts of the world. Why is Ireland so well suited, particularly that little area of Louth? Why is that so well suited to their needs? Like, you said that where you're originally from, there's like a small area, like there's one or two. There's not as many as you've seen in this part of Ireland. So what's the difference in that that makes it such a suitable place for them to nest?
Well, there are three main conditions. First of all, it's the type of beach you're going to have. So you need to have those kind of pebble beach. That's kind of it's at the first part of the beach if you want, and then it's sand, so it provides, so you have marram grass, lime grass, so it provides that camouflage, and they're happy enough. Then of course it has to be a place where there is a good food source. That's very important. So again, the whole area is quite good for sand eels, which they love, and the sprats. So I must say this year it's been very, very good. And I mean, you can see the terns flying over and getting also their food from the Boyne River that is just behind us. And this brings me to the third reason, that it's also fresh water. You need to have a source of fresh water not too far away, obviously, because little terns don't travel too far for their food. Like the sandwich terns that nest nearby, on the water treatment plant down below, they can travel 50 kilometers for their food. A little tern would do 15. It's so you need that food source to be nearby. And also the East Coast is a bit more clement when it comes to water, to weather, to bad weather. So all those conditions, when those conditions are required, and if you know a little bit the East Coast of Ireland, you have that kind of, those perfect kind of environment and conditions together. There could be more small colonies, here and then, but you like, those are the main known ones, basically. I think there is another one in Wexford as well. So Wexford, Kilcool, Portrane, Rockabill Island, and Baltray. But we've done very well this year, as we've had at least 140 hatchlings. It's been very positive.
Terry, do you want to go ahead and?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And yeah, fabulous photos, Frank. Just on the food source and the relevance of the Boyne. What is it? Is it the first stages of feeding the chicks that they need do they need freshwater fish, or why do they need freshwater fish, or when do they need fresh
No, they need
fish?
fresh water, just a source of fresh water for themselves for drinking.
Oh, it's just for drinking.
Yeah, just for drinking.
Okay.
And
why do other terns not need that? You know, there's island
oh, they
nesting
do, but
terns.
it's the three. Like obviously, yeah, probably a lot of birds would prefer that. Some of the environment, I mean, other terns would like to be. They don't mind being in a mixed colony, which has proven now to be a problem for a lot of seabirds because of avian flu. So the little terns actually have their own colony. They don't really mix with others apart from a few plovers, you know, here and then. You know, there is a good cohabitation. But that's it. You know, some prefer, you know, mud flats, grassland like the common terns, and that's it. So all those conditions really on the beach, pebble beach, water, fresh water nearby, and good food source. If that answers it.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
So yeah, any more?
Sorry, Frank, I meant to say Sophie. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, yeah. Frank, how many, like, if it wasn't for the monitoring and fencing off and you know, if it wasn't for sort of human protection in this area, how badly affected would it be by either predators or disturbance from people? I mean, what's you know, left to its own devices, would you have seen that 140 chicks? How many would you have expected?
No. Like there was nearly a 24 hours protection as soon as the first chick is born or out of the shell. Literally, we have people staying most of the night. I would cover 9 hours a day myself. I had 2 students this year, so who did about 6 hours, you know, for like 4 or 5 days a week, and volunteers, a lot of volunteers from the Louth Nature Trust group that just out of the goodness of their heart, you know, came and helped. The problem, even though Baltray Beach, so that's also called Sea Point, so it goes from the mouth of the Boyne to Clorhead. So it's about 7 kilometers. And even though it's not a very favored beach by swimmers, because the sun can be a bit sinky and there are still people walking, and even though there are signs, keep your dog on the lead, you know, it was a daily, at some stage, a daily occurrence of dogs off the lead. You know, I've done a lot of communication as well, because I did a lot of that. You know, you just meet people and have a chat with them. What are you doing? Even though, you know, I was trying to explain, you know, you had little terns over your head, you know, calling, and obviously, you know, giving out. And I tell people, do you hear that? You know, they're giving out. They're not happy. You know, you're annoying them, you know, but, you know, you say it in a nice way, and that's it. Because people, it's not out of badness or anything. They just, people don't realize a dog would be like that, snapping a cheek, you know, or people walking on eggs. And no, we wouldn't have even near that kind of result. So it's completely justified, definitely.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And yeah, speaking of which, I mean, I know there was that story you all want to hear.
Yes, please. Yeah, please go through that again.
Yeah, so basically we had a zone that we built this year outside the perimeter, and we called it the buffer zone, because basically we had about we had about 3, I don't know if you can see there. So you can see it's outside the pen, and we had about 3, actually became 4 terns that decided to nest in that area outside of the pens. So that was going to be a problem. So we created an extra perimeter basically out there. And what was interesting is that those 3 or 4 terns actually at the end became 4 terns, had 3 eggs each. That was quite unusual in that sense. So that that happened. They started to lay at the beginning around the 13th of June, if my 13th, 14th of June, if my memory is correct. So I was keeping an eye on them, and everything was doing okay. And then it was a week by mid-June. It was a week of very, very big tide. So we expected up to 4.95 meters in high tide. And even though we were here during the day, it's very difficult to do anything at night. And at some stage, we had the high tides were during the day. So I was monitoring with the student from the Dundalk IT. We're just more monitoring the high tide because you don't want to interfere if you don't have to. And then as soon as it came closer, you know, everything was going to be lost. So we moved in and made a little depression on 2 or 3 nests further up, moved the eggs back in. The tide came in, would have swallowed them anyway. And then the terns went back into the eggs, into their man-made nest, if you want, you know. And we did as much as we could to recreate, you know, the visual surroundings of the nest with the same algae and seaweed and so forth. They actually, some of them decorate their nest with shells inside, you know, some can be quite elaborate. And we did that for a few days, and it was, yeah, it was very interesting, but it was working. But one night, and we had a tide that was a bit stronger. Our best friend, if you want to keep the tide at bay, would be a western wind, or a northern wind would keep the tide a bit down. But if you have an eastern wind, or funny enough, a southwestern wind that pushes, you know, around, it pushes around Ireland, then you have a much bigger tide. And on top of that, that night, even though we thought everything was going to be okay, during the night there was like a small earthquake, like something tiny. We reckon that that could have been a factor at large of Portugal, and it gave an extra movement, you know, to the tide system. And I came in that morning, and like it was gone. The fence was gone. It actually had entered, you know, the other protected area a little bit, but the rest of the colony was safe. And where the water breached was towards the north side, the pen number 8, the last pen we had, that no birds was actually inside. So all the colony and the nest were fine. But the colony in Portran lost a few nests as well. So anyway, we lost those 3 or 4 nests. I think it was 4 at that stage. And so in the morning I came to investigate, you know, the damage. And of course, as habit, you know, I would scan the area before I walk in with my binoculars, and I spotted one tern was still on a nest, on 1 egg. So she had lost 2 of the eggs with the tide. They were taken, so she was there. So I said, okay, maybe there is something good there. And then there was 2 other terns, a couple, and they were clearly looking for their nest. For the nest was gone and the eggs were gone. So I walked from the south side up, and I found the eggs in the seaweed. They were not necessarily too near each other, but they couldn't find them. But I found them, and the nest was gone. Yeah, you know, I could find the little remaining bit of depression that was in the sand. So I built another one further up a little bit. I built another one and said, listen, if something happens, it happens. And they were clearly distressed, you know, looking for them. So I did that, and I went back to the north side of the beach just to look back. And after 15-20 minutes, so I marked the area, and after 15-20 minutes, what I think is the female sat back on the nest. So I thought, okay, so something is happening, because the little terns alternate. They alternate in the sitting for the brooding, but the female would spend most of the time, to be fair, you know, on the eggs. And I, with the crew, I waited. I was sending some updates every, like I did anyway, every day to the crew, and we waited. And so there were about 3 to 4 days being laid at that stage. So it happened on June 17th, I think, or June 16th, that tide happened. So after 18 days, that brought us to, and nothing was happening. And a month later, over 30 days later, and I know because there was another big tide coming mid-July, around 16th, 17th of July. And after over 30 days, and really, honestly, I didn't believe that anything was going to happen. And it was on a Friday afternoon, and ready to go home. And one of the students said, Frank, I think something is happening. There is one of the two birds is coming back with a fish. So I said, okay. So, but like, it was quite far away, and it was a hot day. It was actually quite a hot day. So you, with the heat wave coming from the sun, it's very, very hard to see. It's very blurred. And we had an excellent telescope. We had a Swarovski. And I said, okay, I'm going in, you know, and basically I just covered it's about a good 100 meters from there. So I went in, and there was a chick had just come out, literally. And I was worrying, oh, that's incredible. You know, that's over 30 days. I mean, that's like 34 days in the egg. And those two eggs had spent, because the high tide happened at about 1:30 in the morning, and I found them at about 8:30. So they had spent several hours not being, protected, really. So, then another big tide was coming that night. So all the elements were like very, very stressful. And the day after, I got a text to say, "Oh, Frank, I think your chick is gone with the tide." I said, "Oh, lovely," you know. And in fact, I got a text from my other student who said, "Frank, I think the second chick is born." And it's very, very hard to understand from a distance the topography of a beach, but the sea had literally touched the nest, but not quite. That tide didn't quite make it. So the second one was born. The other one had survived the night. You know, the first 2 days are kind of crucial. Like I said, it was quite a hot day, a hot afternoon. And then when I went back to work, I knew that night was a 5.1 meter, so quite a high tide again, and the winds were not really favorable. So the first thing I did, I went on the north side of the beach, and I had a look with the telescope. And actually, those chicks were strong and old enough to leave themselves from the danger and follow the adult just a few inches up, and the female had created another little nesty area, and they remained there for the next 21 days. So and they moved then inside when they were strong enough. After a couple of, they moved inside the pens themselves, in and out. They were having great time. Now, unfortunately, the female that stayed on the one egg didn't quite, like, she waited over 40 days sitting on that egg. But we were a bit hopeful, even a week after, but nothing happened. And eventually she gave up by spending more time, feeding. And one day she just didn't come back. But those little guys, I was following them, and there was others of the same age. So and I saw them flapping their wings and take to the sky, to paraphrase the George Gershwin's famous song on summertime. So listen, it was a great moment. It's a great little story. I really didn't think anything like that was going to happen. The only reason I did it is because those birds were looking, and they were behaving in a manner of that they were a bit, distressed. And yeah, so that is the story. And yes, I think it was on Thursday I witnessed the last 4 chicks, because the colony kind of goes very, very quiet. And I witnessed the last 4 that are of very similar ages, just flying with the parents on training. So they will make it. They will make it in time, to go on their migration. They won't be left behind. The parents are still very, very determined. So,
Frank, I meant to ask you this since you told us that story originally. I worked on a project down in Banagher, and I was told that in some cases, depending on the weather, the elements can, exposure, let's say, what were they called again? Red shank, I think, or
yes.
any birds like that have their nest exposed to the elements for a few minutes can be, a failure of a nest, because it could be the weather, the type of weather. It could be too cold and it'll just kill them there.
Yeah.
It could even be, I never thought of this, but if it's raining, it can actually drown the chicks if they decide to hatch at that moment as well.
Yes.
So any bit of rain could actually, even at that like critical moment where they're hatching, can actually be dangerous to them. Any idea how those eggs survived 7 hours being exposed to the elements?
I don't know. Like I said, it was the summer. The the temperature was quite mild at night. Also, accumulations of seaweed. I don't know if you ever put your hand, in seaweed in the strand. Even in, it feels quite warm. So I think the way they were, maybe they were sheltered by the seaweed, I think, because they start emanating some gas, I think, when they are in the, on the outside of the sea. So it always feels quite warm for a long time. So I think that could be something to do with that. I'm not an expert literally in what happens. Maybe they're they're stronger, or do we know enough? I don't know, but that's what happened. But I checked my notes, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, that tide, it happened during the night anyway. So they were, they were for a few hours out, but they were inside the seaweed, and those kind of green algae, they're not the ulva, they're the other one, the more stringy ones. I can't remember their names. So there was a mix of them, but there was a good bit. So I think that temperature generated around that that tiny ecosystem, if you want, created a micro conditions that were okay to keep the eggs, probably to slow down their progression, because it took them over 30 days rather than 21. It took them a solid 9 to 10 days extra to come out of the shells. And we know that because we have, we monitor them every day. They were the only one in that area, there was no, nothing weird, or we could have made a mistake, that was the eggs, I found then, for sure. But it is known, I did check, that it can take up to 30 days sometimes for a chick of Little Terns to come out. It's not so, it wasn't like super unusual, a bit over 30 days. But yeah, I think that's what I think it is. It's the seaweed actually offered a protective environment, warmer temperatures that kept the egg going, if you want. Probably slow down their development, but I think that's why if they had been found in the sand, I don't think the outcome would have been the same, for sure.
That's fascinating. I just like that aspect of really the aspect that you just don't know. In some cases, obviously the seaweed is there, could have protected them, but for the water to have come in and pushed them up onto that, there's just so many things that was against them, and actually in the end it actually, well, they survived by chance, if anything.
Completely. I mean, it was like the other big tide would have swallowed them completely, because the next big tide came exactly like a month later, and you're like, I can't believe this is happening after all this, and you don't do it for yourself, and of course you're getting some form of satisfaction. And some people who say, might say, oh well, it could be a bit controversial to do anything like that. The only reason I've done it is because they were looking for them. They were clearly looking for them when I came in. They hadn't given up, and I thought, well, it's just a little help from one species to another. That was all the interference, if you want to go that way. All I did is I didn't go and build a shelter and all that. I just put my knuckle in the sand and put the eggs there. They were looking for them.
The parents came back pretty soon after you made the new nest.
Yeah, not as soon as the first time, because 30 centimeters could be too far away in some cases, and but it was quite a moving moment, because you can see the bird flying back, and they're incredible at spotting and finding their chicks actually, over the site. So yeah, pretty soon after. It was a bit longer than I expected. It was about 20 minutes, to be honest. But then,
okay. And you made the nest somehow recognizable to them, apart from the eggs.
Yeah, so it was a little higher because I was aware of the next tides. So I had to put it on dry sand, but not too far away. I put a marker, and the bird was, well, they were flying around me anyway, because they knew there was a disturbance. But then they went back into the exact area. And then by flying over, you could see the bird had spotted. There was something there. And you recreate from memory, what was, more or less. And thankfully, it's a very rudimentary nest.
Nest, yeah.
And remember, there were 3 eggs. So, one of them was gone.
So it's just 2 now, yeah.
And that's it. It was just gone, like the rest of the other. I mean, we lost 10 eggs that day. They were the last 2. And like, I knew it was pointless to go and comb the beach, to build nests for the sake of it. They were the only 2 birds that were looking for them. Yeah. And the other one who didn't give up, and she had lost 2 of them. and they were gone. You know, that's it. But no, that's it. That's what happened.
So can I ask just something different, if I can?
Yes.
Where are the little terns now? Where do they roost? I mean, are they at Sandymount already, or are they still coming to Baltray, or where do they roost?
One of the gentlemen from Louth Nature Trust, Breffney Martin, lives in Carlingford, and he spotted them in Carlingford, which is
okay.
It's not super far for a Little Tern. You know, definitely you can see the mountains of Mourne in the distance, no problem. They just go on a walkabout. You know, I think it's part of like swallows would do. You know, before, you know, they
flocking around and building up their
flocking
flying
around,
skills.
building up, and are you guys ready? And you know, and like this week was, when I came in on Monday, was eeringly quiet. You had basically the 4 adults over the colony looking after the 4 chicks, so they had 2 each, and you know, that's it. There was on a fledgling as well that was being fed by another parent, but I don't think I had less than 10 birds on the site. You know, it was very, very quiet. And then one of my colleague, volunteer Noel, was there on Wednesday afternoon, I think it was, and then 40 just decided to come back, and then they flew over the point. So they are around. So I think by the end of the month, which we're nearing now, you know, they all gather and start their merry way, and some might be trailing behind a little bit. You know, it's not going to be like a flock of geese or anything like that, but you know, they stop. You know, they stop on the way. You know, they stop on the way. They don't go the full, as most of us know. You know, they don't go the full. You know, they will probably stop on the way along the French coast, and you know, they follow the coast pretty much. Yeah.
Sophie has her hand raised there. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. Frank, I can't remember if you said they were ringed, and if they are ringed, what's the sort of proportion of birds that come back to the same place each year? Is that hit and miss, or are they quite loyal, site loyal? I'd be interested to know.
Well, there was a lot of birds get ringed in in Kilcool and Rockabill, so we do get an overflow from them. Some of the birds have been ringed in the past in Baltray, so I did notice some of them were ringed. I think there was the color for the area for Ireland is green, and then you have the aluminium ring on the other side. So yes, some would come back, I'd say, but it's whatever goes. You know, we had some birds coming back after Portrane had a bit of a problem with the tide, and they had like a fox, I think, literally wiped the colony out. So some of them decided to have a second go with us, you know, in Baltray. It was clear, you know, it was a bit late. That's why I was monitoring those last 4, you know, this week. But no, some would establish themselves somewhere else. It's not like the kittiwakes where they would go back to the same cliff, the same nest year after year. You know, it's quite incredible, because I worked on that project as well, and we had literally there was 4 small colored plastic ring on each of them, so we knew exactly the individuals. You know, it's like an identity card, you know, on that campaign that had been done. So they would actually come back, literally same cliff, same nest every year, most of them. So there you go. But the Welsh ones, those ringed in Wales, I think it's a yellow ring. I have seen one in Baltray, but I think it gives us an idea that actually it doesn't really matter. You know, they could be establishing the colony next year in, well, I mean, some individuals might go to Port Rowan or to Rockabill, depending on how they feel it and the flock they're with and so forth.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Frank, just how often would you be doing that 6-hour walk? And you talk about nest disturbance, like, you know, you would have to limit that, obviously. I know that Catherine Finney, when she was working on that area in Banagher that we were helping her with, the lapwings and some of the birds, she was convinced that they actually recognized her, so didn't display as much concern when she was approaching areas that she knew there was nests in. Did you have a similar experience, or what was that sort of interaction like?
Well, once you enter the perimeter, they are not happy, you know, that's for sure. And some of them would recognize you, and that's fine, but they still, you know, they still don't like it. And they definitely do not like when we wear our yellow high-vis jackets. You know, you can hear the alarm being a lot
louder.
A lot louder, yeah, for sure. So yeah, I would go in once a week, but once the chicks are born, it's a different story. I mean, because I would be looking down and being very, very aware not to step on anything I shouldn't be stepping on. But you could hear, I thought somebody was shooting at me, like the bullet, the bird would go fly very, very near. They don't touch, the little terns don't touch. The Arctic tern would take a bit of your scalp, you know, no problem, you know, if it's, and for me, it's a language, you know, they're not happy, they're distressed. So you just need to
move along as quickly as you can.
Move along, do your work, not too quickly, but in a, you know, in an intelligent manner, you know, but some of them would let you know they're not really happy, and then they say, oh, you know, it's him again, that's all right, you know. And you know, some areas it was very interesting. You could be a bit closer and stay there, and they would just go after 2 minutes. And some other areas, they just wouldn't like you near there. They would just not be happy, and it could go on for quite a while.
Excellent, thanks, Frank. Frank, thanks for that. We have another 3 people here as well, Matt, Dominic, and Mary. Do you have any questions, or you know, if you want to put them in the chat, please do. It's I know it's been between ourselves.
But there could be Dominic. I see Dominic Hartigan there is one of the member, the chair.
Okay.
Nature Trust. So
all familiar ground.
and Matt, I think Matt is one of our oldest volunteers as well on the site. But yeah, if they have any questions, I'm sure. But I got many of the answers from those people. Anyway, so.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah. There's Dominic. There he is. You can just unmute Dominic if you want to say anything.
Oh, he's amusing. Yeah, sure. Oh, I can. Yeah.
Hang on. Sorry, Dominic. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for me to interlope. It's always very entertaining listening to Frank repeat the story, because we're all quite familiar with it, and have enjoyed the very delicate way in which Frank managed this site for us this year, which is great. And I think the evidence of the husbandry is there for all to see, that we've had such a lovely result, which is great. And it's great that Frank can come along and talk to all of you like this, because it helps refresh our knowledge about managing these conservation sites. It's great. It's such a pleasure.
Dominic, I suppose you probably might be more well placed then to answer this question. How long have you been having this you know, yearly monitoring going on, and why did you decide to use this method of conservation. As Frank said, like, it's, you know, the less intrusion, the better. But obviously, it's such a critical nesting area that there are points at which these sort of like steps need to be taken that are quite intrusive. Again, just from my own experience in Banagher, I heard a similar thing from Catherine Finney saying the very same thing. You know, it's a real fine line that you walk on when you take over a site to put in these physical, you know, deterrents to people or to other predators to keep an area safe, you know, for protection.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because actually, can you hear me? It's just on fuzzy. Can you hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you now. Yeah, Dominic. Yeah.
Okay, it just went crazy there. This project was started in 2007, and by two women, Sandra McKeever and Margaret Riley, and they kept it going for 5 years. And then after 5 years, they had grown a little weary of it, and Morris and myself and Breffney, as who was mentioned earlier, and a few others decided to keep it going. The evidence was there because the birds were already nesting there anyway, but we noticed that the intrusion of people and predators and stuff was actually preventing any successful breeding. And so that's where it started. And we've developed the hard fencing type styles by watching other people do it and learning by talking to all the other groups. And so the issue of interference is a constant debate between those who are very keen to record and ring, and those who, like Frank and myself to a degree, regard interference is a hindrance, and that we should really be forming an outer cordon around the birds and let them at it. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the general perception is that, you know, conservation in this way is very hands-on, and people see the sort of benefits and the outcomes, which is great. As Frank's input, as Frank's said, you know, there's been a successful year of nesting. But in the long term, it's not the final solution. I think even yesterday on Twitter, Porrick Fogarty was pointing out that building nest boxes aren't the solution to the overall crisis that we're having, and had a conversation with Birdwatch Ireland about that yeah, it was true that, you know, building these nest boxes aren't the solution. It's more, you know, allowing the environment, you know, help or repair itself so that there doesn't need to be this amount of human interaction. But, you know, the results that we get from that, from a conservation body, is like people see that something physical is happening, so they go, oh, well, this is great, they're doing something. When those other sort of steps are far more long term, you know, like the education and the sort of asking people to keep their dogs on a leash, all that stuff.
Well, Frank, if I may, Frank very kindly agreed to do a school visit. Our local school is very keen to have a relationship with projects like these, because they actually see that as being a part of their education process, which we agree with as well. So Frank did a visit to the school, and then one of the classes, I think actually it was two of the classes, came down to visit the site, and which we did this year, and we did previous years as well, which is great. And so we have a recruiting campaign insofar as getting the youngsters, if we can get a few of those youngsters interested enough to come. They're our future volunteers, because let's face it, most of our volunteer cohort are well into the retirement phase of life, and, you know, aren't going to last forever. So this kind of an effort is multifaceted. There are lots of things to be done. One of which you talk about in terms of nest boxes and stuff. The environment in which the birds nest is a very important feature of this conservation object. The conservation object isn't just the birds, it's about making certain that the habitat is maintained actually in a way that is sympathetic to progress of the maintenance of species. And it's all too easy for us to alter habitat to suit us, the human species, without realizing that it has the opposite effect for all the other occupants of that same habitat. So one of our efforts on the Baltray site is actually about enhancing not only the beach where the birds nest, but also the hinterland, which we've got a program going in terms of ground nesting birds generally, and we have quite a population of meadow piplets and skylarks and a number of other species in the reverse buffer zone, the one that we don't really look at much, but we travel through and other people walk through and what have you. So we're generally upping the effort and the ante on that area as well. So because they're actually an intrinsic part of the security of the little terns on the beach. So there's a lot to be discussed and developed in this idea of conservation, because conservation isn't an isolated incident. It's not putting a nesting box up and saying that's the job done. Certainly not. It's much more to do with habitat management and perception management. People need to learn. And Franck's work on the beach, he's an exemplar of how to look after a species in its habitat. But he's also, and he doesn't talk about it much himself, but I mean, he's also been one of our foremost ambassadors in terms of dealing with and appraising the public as they come by casually and getting them to engage. And that's by far the more important part of this project, because the more people we engage and show the benefits of their understanding and cooperation, understanding is the main thing, the more chance of these projects actually becoming more and more self-sustaining. Albeit that has to be qualified by the fact that there's an enormous pressure on habitats, because more and more people, particularly post-pandemic, are using our beach facilities for recreational purposes in a way that was never done before to that extent. Mm-hmm. I mean, as Franck said, our beach in Baltray is a relatively underused beach, but you wouldn't think it now. We have, where we used to have 20 or 30 people a day, maybe, now we have hundreds. That's a huge thing. And we all know it. We all love enjoying this outside beauty that we have on our doorsteps. And the pandemic has actually demonstrated to people who'd never come across it before. Great, but let them enjoy it in sympathy rather than for their own self-purpose. That's all. Anyway, enough of me.
No, that's great, Dominic. Thanks very much for putting it all in context in that way. Well, look, we're just passing by 2:15 here. I don't know if anyone has any final questions they'd like to ask Franck, and we might wrap it up then.
No, that's right. If I may add,
Franck, yeah, go ahead.
What Dominic just said. I mean, there is not only the terns. I mean, the terns and the plovers were such a very demanding project in terms of where you have to be there. You know, you have to listen, and the times I spent as well at high tide, especially because it's not only the little terns that were, you know, nestled in that little area of rest. You know, you're talking like 300 sanderlings, dunlins, plovers, cormorants that are just having a rest in that portion of the beach at high tide. And when it was quite critical, you know, for the chicks and the disturbance again, you know, I would spend hours there just to tell people, could you go another way? And, you know, I had the telescope out and I was, you know, I want, you know, willing to show them. And then suddenly people would realize, so communication is super important. But if we had, you know, more volunteers, I mean, you could do like walks, you know, a couple of walks a day around the dunes. I mean, between the cinnabar, the burnet moth, you know, those kind of black with red dots. You have the pyramid orchid. You have a huge array of native wildflowers, pipits and skylarks, 4 species of birds of prey: merlin, sparrowhawk, kestrel, peregrine, you know, short-eared owl at night. I mean, a lot of things could be done and developed, but you need to work with the people. And yes, like all of us, you know, in Ireland and all over, you need volunteers, you need people, and we all need more funds as well, you know, for small organizations like that, you know, to be able to do things. But you can tell the interest, you know, the biggest victory, it's like the small victories when, you know, there was a man taking a walk a bit too close to the perimeter. So I went over and meet him, and I said, "Oh, hi, how are you?" You know, and he thought, I didn't know if you were coming to speak to me or to give out to me. And I said, "No, sure. You know, we're having a chat here." And I explained, do you hear that noise suddenly since you started walking, you know, close? All those birds are actually giving out, and all that. And we had a great chat. And he came back. I said, "Come, you know, come back with your son." The son was into nature and all that, so only 10-year-old. And they did come back. And I did give them a little tour with the telescope and show them the, you know, lion's mane jellyfish on the beach and the terns and the chicks and all that. And suddenly, and the man said to me that phrase is, "You know what? I wouldn't have been aware of all that. And now, since you have spoken to me, I am listening and I'm very careful of what's happening around me." And I was like, well, that's great, job done. You know, that's fantastic. That's communication, simple. And that's another reward, you know, a less romantic reward than the eggs found in the seaweed, but it's still a lovely reward, I think. So lots to be done, where there's lots of fantastic places and areas to protect in Ireland, for sure. Yeah.
Excellent, Frank. I think that actually nicely rounds it up, to be honest. It's just, you know, really fascinating to hear and see these pictures in context as well, with the stories that you're adding to them. Yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely come back to this again. So thanks very much for your time. No, not at all. No, but thanks very much for sharing your time. And as I said, this will all be put online. So I'll share it with the volunteers as well. You can share it with the volunteers when we're finished.
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Look, thanks everyone. Sorry, Terry, do you have your clapping there? Is this? Are you raising a hand?
Yeah, that's just a round of applause.
All right. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, I'll share this online. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll get it probably tomorrow or the day after. But thanks everyone for joining us today. And we'll hopefully do something like this again soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
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 Well.